Thank you. Your feedback lets me know which videos to prioritize by letting me know which videos will help you most. This video is for beginner scripters in Horizon Worlds, or specifically for those who are not familiar with coding but want to move towards creating awesome scripted worlds like these in Horizon Worlds. My personal bio and links to related videos and resources will be in the description of this video. With that, let's get started. This video will be broken into the following sections. What are variables and value inputs? How to create and name a variable, what you can do with each variable type. And finally, I'll give you your assignment that's designed to get you comfortable creating and using variables. What are variables and value inputs? Value inputs are the information, data, or parameters used in scripts that are broken up into various types. Each value input type behaves and can be used in different ways. A person's name would be an example of a string value input, since it involves a group of letters or characters. A person's age would be a number value input. Variables are containers for specific types of value inputs used in scripts. A variable's value type tells you how the information can be used in or manipulated by a script and matches the value input type it holds. Which is to say, a value input and a variable behave in the same way when used in scripts. Another similarity of variables and value inputs is that their types are not always interchangeable. So a variable meant to hold one type of value input can't be used to hold another value input. For example, a string variable is for letters, words, and sometimes numbers. A number variable is for numbers and numbers only. What I'm saying is you might be able to put a number into a string variable, but you cannot put a string of letters or words into a number variable. A variable is not quite the same as a value input though. A value input is hard-coded into the script, meaning to edit or change it, you need to change the script itself. Whereas a variable can be defined and changed from the script panel and the object property panel of the object the script is attached to. This is super powerful because you can write a script with a bunch of variables and then customize it for each separate object you apply the script to. So using a variable, I can write a script that says, paint this object, and then use a color variable to make each object get painted a different color. Without the variable, just using a value input would mean all the objects would be the same color, or I'd have to create a new script for each separate object. A value input and a variable behave in the same way when used in scripts, so the main difference is where you can edit them. Most action or motion code blocks come with value inputs already in place, but these can always be replaced with a variable. Which brings us to our next section. How to create and name a variable. Now, to create a variable, you need to come over to the last tab in the script property panel called the, you guessed it, variable tab. Clicking new variable gives you a pop-up that lets you name and select the value type of the variable. This is also where you can use the list toggle to create lists, which I won't go into in this video, but comment below if you'd like a video on lists and how to use them. When naming your variables, be clear with your labels so you don't forget what needs to be plugged into each variable. This will also be helpful when you go back to read an old script or when working with someone else's scripts. If you watched my scripting, what is it video, you know that I described scripting as writing sentences. So remember that your variables are like the nouns in those sentences and should make sense when you try to read it. When naming variables, name them as you would a person, place, or thing. So instead of just saying rotate thing1 to vector1, try rotate door to open. The second version of the script line makes the purpose of the script very clear. This is just a tip, not a hard and fast rule. Just make your names as general or specific as you think suits the script. Since scripts are reusable for multiple purposes, you may want to think ahead about the various ways you will use it and name variables according to that. Now that we've created some variables, let's move on to the next section. What can you do with each variable type? As I mentioned before, the variable type will determine what you can do with a variable. Some variables, with the aid of special code blocks found on the Operators tab, can mimic or build other input types. I won't go into great detail for each, but just enough to give you an idea of what situations might be better suited for each variable type. So let's get started. The player variable. The player variable is the only variable type you can't manually set in an object's property panel, but you can use it to remember a specific player, for instance, when they trigger an event. In the event, when grabbed by player, you see that the event has its own value input type of player. What we can do is use this information to define our own variable called target player. To define a variable, you can use the code block set2 found on the Values tab. Defining a variable with the set2 block tells the script what the variable represents. This is how you fill the container, so to speak, with a value. So to fill this out, we want to put our variable target player into the variable slot and then grab the player value that comes with the grab event to the value slot. To add a little paraphrase translation here, this line of script is saying, when an object is grabbed by a player, let me know which player grabbed it and save that player's tag to this container. By having the variable target player, I'm able to pass the player tag or information to other events that don't have an embedded player value. Using my container analogy, a player variable allows you to carry the player's information to other parts of a script where it can be used. In this example, I'm telling the next script to transport the player a few seconds after they grabbed the object. Number variables. Number variables hold digits that can be used alone or with operations found on the Operation tab, or used to construct other value inputs. Number variables are useful in saving time updating number values that appear in multiple places in a script. For instance, if I have a stack of events that all need to trigger the next event after the same amount of time, I can create a variable that I plug into each of those events. So if I need to modify how long before the next event is triggered, I only have to update it in one place. Boolean variables. Now I've heard it pronounced Boolean, Boolean, so I may use either pronunciation interchangeably. And I guess you could too. I like to think of Boolean simply as a switch. Like a switch, a Boolean has two positions or values it can be. No more, no less. It's either one or the other. When looking at the Boolean variable type, you see that the switch toggles between true and false. Booleans are useful for tracking if something is yes or no, on or off, up or down, basically anything you want to use it to represent as long as it's a this or that choice. I mostly use Booleans with an if code block to tell what state an object is in, and then to react based on that state. Vector variables. Vector variables, in my opinion, are the most powerful variable type, as a vector can be used in move blocks as well as scale blocks. Once you have a good understanding of vectors, it can be a pretty powerful tool that allows you to do some pretty fun things. A common use for vector variables is remembering the starting point of an object or moving an object to a new position. In this script, I am creating two variables. One is the start position and the other the end position I want to move the object to. After the object is moved to the end position, I want to move it back to start. Instead of manually looking at the object's property panel to see where the start position is, I can set the variable using two blocks. The set2 block from the values tab and the position of object block from the operations tab. Now, when the world starts, a snapshot of the object's starting position is taken. Then I can use that variable in the move script to move it back to start. I'm using move to and move by in this demo, which behave in two different ways. Comment below if you'd like a video on how to use each. Rotation variables. Rotation variables, similar to how I'm able to snapshot an object's position, I'm also able to save an object's rotation, or the way it's oriented, using a variable. You can do some pretty cool things with rotation variables, like making characters look at a player. Comment below if you'd like a video on how. Color variables. With the color variable, you are able to build your own rainbow shifting object, or make painting supplies for your players to use in your world. I'll be clear here, I don't use this variable a lot, but it's still a valuable tool that you should play around with. I'd love to hear how you plan or currently use it, so please let me know in the comments. In this script, I made a bunch of color variables and a loop using a list to make it cycle through all the colors. Pretty, right? String variables. A string is another fun and useful variable, as you can use it to store dialogue or a narrative that you can play back for your players to read. In this script, I created a few string variables to give me space to write in, then another string variable to summarize all the lines into a single string variable I called paragraph. With the set2 block and a few plus signs from the operators tab, I'm able to build a paragraph that I can easily edit line by line. You can use this method to create multiple paragraphs and script them to play on a text gizmo whenever you want. You can also use a single variable to do the same thing, but I find it's easier to see my text when there are multiple variables. Also, if you need line breaks, you can simply use the less than sign, BR, greater than sign between each line. Object variables. Object variables are the only variable type whose matching value input on the Values tab appears as a predefined and non-editable input. The self-value input always refers to the object the script is assigned or attached to. Unlike with other value inputs, you cannot change the value of a self-value input. Object variables, however, allows you to have a script live on one object, yet affect another object. For example, I can write a script that scales an object over time. The default value is self, but I can replace that self with an object variable. Once I place the script on an object, I can define the object variable by grabbing the pill connector and dragging it to the variable's spot. I know it has connected correctly when the name of the variable slot updates to match the name of the object I connected. Now the script will affect the object I connected and not the object the script lives on. Let's say I want to use the same script, but I want it to affect self instead of a separate object. You can still use a variable and simply connect the object to itself by dragging its own pill connector to the variable spot. That's all the variable types and a high-level flyby of how to use them. If you'd like a more in-depth video about any of the variable types I went over, please let me know which ones in the comments. Now, your assignment. Now you know the difference between a value input and a variable, know how to create a variable, and how you can use each variable type. It's time for you to take variables out for a spin. Your assignment is to write a script using your favorite blocks from the Actions and Motions tab and try to replace the default value inputs with variables you create. Place their script on an object and then make a copy of that object using the duplicate setting by clicking right with your thumbstick on the right-hand controller. Change the variables on each object and observe how the variable allows you to make the two objects behave differently without changing the script. How might you use this to make your world more interactive? Getting ahead. When writing scripts, it's common to write the script first, then either go back through and add variables or create them on the fly. To get better at planning, thinking through a script, and debugging as you go, try creating your variables as your first step in script making. Once you have the variables created, go ahead and attach the script to objects and plug in your variables. These don't have to be the final object you plan to use the script on. They can be simple representations. Now, when you write your scripts, it's easier to know when something isn't working because you can pause the writing and jump into preview mode to check things out. Or better yet, write your script in such a way that you don't have to jump into preview mode. That brings us to the end of this video. Since you made it to the end, please leave a like, and if you'd like to see more videos like this one, go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell notification so you'll know right away when a new video goes up. Thanks, and see you in Horizon.